We're a nonprofit organization dedicated to eradicating human slavery, human trafficking, child exploitation, and child sexual abuse material through disrupting networks and applying data technology and advanced analytics and intelligence.
Welcome to the Anti-Human Trafficking Intelligence Initiative's 2023 Tech for Good Against Human Trafficking and Child Exploitation panel. We hope that you are enjoying and learning a lot from this year's Follow Money, Fight Slavery Summit. My name is Christine Talley. I will be the moderator for today's panel. I am an intelligence analyst with Cobwebs Technologies, an AI-powered web intelligence solution. I'm also formerly with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, serving as an intel analyst with the Anti-Human Trafficking Task Force, and I'm a volunteer with the National Child Protection Task Force. I am honored to be here today with this incredible panel that ATII has put together to discuss strategies to combat human trafficking and child exploitation. We'll be talking about their companies and their technology and how they support collaborative efforts with organizations like ATII in order to prevent and investigate these crimes. Gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Looking forward to talking with all of you. I would like to take a moment to have each of you just introduce yourselves, introduce your companies. Chris, you're up over here in my top left, so why don't you go ahead and start?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Christine. So, hi everyone, my name is Chris Bagnell. I'm a solutions director with Quantexa. Quantexa is a big data and analytics company that's pioneered the contextual decision intelligence frameworks. They're out of London basically, but globally as well, within North America, EPAC and EMEA. We enable companies to get a complete connected view of internal and external data. So bringing this external information that's globally within, organizations such as Moody's, Dun & Bradstreet, et cetera, and bringing that together with internal data to really give investigators a view of things they don't have today. Work with a large number of public and private organizations globally. I've been in the financial crime space for 16 years now, 14 of that in banking, last 2 in technology. Got involved in the anti-human trafficking space and with ATII and Aaron, this organization, several years ago. Really got exposure to this in banking and some products and services we had that had high exposure to human trafficking risks. And from those time, I've spent a number of years trying to do more, bring technology and work with NGOs down to the mid-sized banks and banking globally as well, so we can do more from training, education, information sharing. So really excited to be here and talk to you about what we do at Quantexa and how we can work better together as a community.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris. Bret, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks, Christine, and thank you to ATI for putting this together and then for the invite to participate in this esteemed panel. ADF is a digital forensic evidence collection company. So we focus on frontline investigators who are trying to solve CSAM and human trafficking cases, as well as other types of crime. And we empower frontline investigators to use our technology out at the scene to quickly collect evidence and identify and flag what could be human trafficking evidence or known CSAM or potential new CSAM. So we work worldwide, typically with law enforcement, but also with corporations to help empower them and make it easy for them to find evidence and take that through to the prosecutor.
Perfect. Thank you. Great to have you, Bret. Yeah. Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. So I'm Steve Adams. I'm the product marketing lead at Skopenow. My background is in investigations. So I started out my career in law enforcement as an intelligence analyst. Relevant cases I worked there really were serious organised crime, modern slavery, and child sexual exploitation. I've then moved in through a number of different intelligence and investigation roles, primarily at Royal Mail, before finally finding my place now at Skopenow. With regards to Skopenow's work in disrupting human trafficking, and we are a technology company, so we build tools for innocent investigation that ultimately help our customers or partners take a technology-driven approach to ending human trafficking, whether that's government, charity, private organizations. Ultimately, an automated solution that navigates public data, collects relevant information, puts it in court-ready reports to help organizations scale their efforts.
Wonderful. Thank you, Steve. Thanks for being here today. And Bob.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm Bob Griffin. I am a board member of Siren Technologies out of Ireland. We build a industry-leading platform called Siren Investigate. It supports the intelligence community, law enforcement community, and the financial communities, really around bringing disparate information together and providing sophisticated analytics tools to allow you to kind of mine weak signals and develop those into investigative opportunities and leads, et cetera. I had the privilege back during the Obama administration of sitting on a White House task force on human trafficking. I would like to say, boy, we did a great job and we've solved all these problems. Unfortunately, it's becoming more and more of a concern every day, as well. It should be. The important thing is to pay attention to it and have events like this where we continue to highlight the need for being able to solve and service these kinds of problems. So I appreciate ATI putting this panel together, and Christine, your support. I'm looking forward to the discussion today. It looks like a great panel, and it's interesting to see people that come from different walks, but all from everything from the front line people that are doing it to kind of the back office intelligence community to the financial support. These are all the things that we've got to be able to bring together to really make a dent in what's happening in this industry, its capability.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bob. And you bring up a great point, and this is actually where I would like for us to start today. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime releases a global report on trafficking every 2 years. So they just released their most recent report in January. Reading through those findings, I see things that are very concerning in our fight against trafficking. So for the first time in the 20 years that they've been collecting this data, they're actually seeing a decrease in the number of victims that are being identified globally. There's also been a decrease in the number of human trafficking convictions. So again, this leads us to an interesting question. And Bob, I'd like to start with you, obviously, because you've been on the front lines of this for such a long time. We are seeing incredible advancements in technology in the last 20 years. And so you'd think that we would be making strides in this. But as you and I have talked about before, the technology is a double-edged sword, isn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's funny. This gray hair is real. What's left of it, and it's from either being in or servicing this community for almost 50 years. It's been a long time. 40 years. I'm sorry, I'm not that old. 40 years. But the interesting issue is that we have to kind of keep in mind is that in the traditional kind of technology environment as it applies to the good guys versus the bad guys, bad guys are early adopters of technology. They have looked at technology as a way to facilitate what I call the ultimate pay for performance job. If they do something nefarious and can make money at it, that's how they get paid. Human traffickers are not only early adopters, but they're also early adapters. They will change as technology changes in order to circumvent the events that technology kind of help uncover and discover. They have, unfortunately, more money at this than the good guys do, and they can throw at it and adapt it faster to the solution. And that puts, that side really kind of against, this side from a perspective of how fast can they move. The thing that I've always believed is that technology can move faster than the speed of threat. The challenge is how quickly can we assimilate what technology is telling us? How quickly can we use those kinds of things to help circumvent these challenges? These bad guys can throw money at it now, and now with kind of prosumer technologies. In the old days, they only had access to kind of mundane, basic level types of technologies. Now with these kind of prosumer tech, that's widely available, they can simply build their own tunnels or their own pathways and deploy their own tech or hire, really qualified freelancers. It's not just giving, it's not just one technology. It's kind of a mosaic, that's constituting or comprising that kind of requisite observational space. And so we have to be, as advanced as possible, continuing to look at all of those weak signals out there as quickly as possible, make some decisions, get people to understand what's happening in that observation space, and allow them to kind of take action as quickly as possible if we're going to make a real dent in these kinds of things. So it's a challenge. This is not an easy problem set to solve.
Absolutely. Bret, how do you feel as far as that what you've seen and the changes in technology? You're working with Frontline. What kind of things are you all experiencing trying to stay ahead of these guys?
Yeah, I think, Bob, you bring up a great point in terms of adapting quickly. And one of the things that we've seen in government, right, is government doesn't traditionally adapt very quickly. They take time. They want to have studies. They want to, try to get direction from policymakers and community. They're either disengaged or frustrated with government, and particularly with policing. We've seen that over the past few years in particular. So I think that one of the things that needs to happen is we need to try to use technology at a faster pace within the ranks. And one of the things that we have to realize is that young people coming in as police recruits are typically going to be much more technology savvy than those in the leadership position. And there's a lack of, there's a bureaucratic sort of slowdown to adapt. And I think this causes some stress internally. And one of the things that we've done with the best intentions, of course, for instance, is building digital forensic labs, which require highly trained, very expensive people and equipment to be able to monitor and kind of gather evidence from devices when they're confiscated. And one of the things we need to do is just change the approach. Let's empower the front line to be able to quickly detect criminal activity where they find it at the scene and be able to share information. So there's not just empowering the front line and trusting them that they can use the better technology that's out there today, which is designed to be more user friendly and easier to learn. But let's also figure out how can we share that information back and forth in a secure and thoughtful way that allows law enforcement to act for the victim.
Absolutely. Steve, I'd love to hear from you because, again, as a former analyst with a law enforcement department, I felt like, and I get up on soapboxes all the time now when I do presentations, law enforcement has got to get into open source intelligence. We have got to be focused on it. And with the plethora of platforms and apps and the ways people communicate and commit these crimes, how is it from the Skopenow point of view as far as working with agencies and bringing them up to speed on the amount of information available out there on the big wide internet?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you touched on a really good point there of law enforcement has been reluctant, I would say, to step into the automation side of open source intelligence. So in the UK, I was doing open source intelligence back when I started out, at least 10, maybe even 15 years, they've been doing manual investigations. But with the amount of, human trafficking going on and the amount of individuals involved, you can't just rely on those manual techniques. And the issue is that as technology changes and these human traffickers and other criminals become aware of the techniques that law enforcement are using, they change their approach, like Bob was saying there. And ultimately, keeping on top of all those resources is a real effort, and training all those new people that come in to conduct investigations ethically and legally, again, is another major issue. So automation technology there is really starting to be embraced, particularly in the US and the UK at the moment. We're working with a lot of partners there who are now starting to embrace it and seeing the benefits, and also the approach that you can conduct a full investigation and put together a full subject profile, business profile, a lengthy intelligence report, but you don't always have to do that in every case. You can do basic due diligence if maybe at the financial level, when you're conducting investigations into when you're doing due diligence against all these people that may be involved in human trafficking, you can really just do a very basic check against each person, because technology now allows you to do that. It can take minutes rather than the hours it used to take. And that's really what I think is the future now of human trafficking investigations. Taking those day-long OSINT investigations and condensing them down into minutes really opens up the opportunity. But staying on the law enforcement side, and in response to your question, really, I think jurisdictional issues is a really big issue that could contribute to why prosecutions have gone down, because as criminals are now online, you can conduct a crime in the Philippines and live stream it to people in the US. And therefore, you've now got to prosecute people in both the Philippines and the US, which means you have to get law enforcement from both companies working together. Both countries, sorry. And that's a really big issue that still needs to be tackled.
Absolutely. And Chris, I want you to chime in on the financial side. So we're talking about struggles of technology, but we've got issues supporting the financial sector as well, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely we do. So this is more of my thoughts generally versus the pockets, the really interesting innovation that some institutions have been working on globally. But over my career, we've had this on the tech side, this balance between staying regulatorily compliant with regulations, which is critical, right, to the financial sector, to maintaining banks, to having good fin crime programs. But then on the innovation side, that becomes difficult, right? So it's, technology I've used throughout my career has been, done its job, right? Very rules-based, produces alerts, gives us intelligence that we can then take, investigate, and give that to law enforcement. But in terms of innovation, that was a little more difficult, right? To support that. But then also, how do we deal with that from a regulatory compliant point of view? What I've really seen, and interesting globally too, right, over the past several years, when I think about the US, and I've seen things in Singapore and Hong Kong and Europe and what they've been doing and advancing innovation and giving that to the institutions, and then the institutions adopting it has been really great to see. In the US, we've had things such as like the AML Act of 2020, which just came out a couple of years ago. We've had the regulators, the FIC regulators put out guidance several years ago around innovation and technology. So you're seeing more of that coming out. The AML Act allows for more innovation. In fact, it almost demands it, right? It says we want to see innovation. So I think what I've been seeing from institutions now is, okay, we've done our job, right? Our programs are strong. We've done the things we need to do to be regulatorily compliant. So how do we do more now with innovation? And especially in human trafficking, there's a number of mid-sized institutions that do a lot in this space and are looking to innovate with technologies that that are out there today, both from an investigation due diligence point of view, but then monitoring and alerts, using data that ATII may produce, for example. How to ingest that data into my technology and actually use it in a more meaningful way to do good. So that has really evolved, but it's still a challenge, right? Because you've still got this really great data, all this information that, Bret, Steve, and Bob's, tools have today, but how do we give that to the banks and have them use it? That's still, I think we still got a ways to go on that, but we're definitely moving in the right direction. But yeah, it's still really difficult.
Thank you. So I want to kind of move along here, and when we talk about trafficking, and I think sex trafficking obviously gets a lot of the media, but statistically, actually, there's more activity involved in labor trafficking. So Steve, yeah. We talked a little bit. I know that you're actually focused a little bit on organized retail crime right now and trafficking as a nexus. So how do we leverage public data in these kinds of investigations?
So there's a couple of different approaches that we're doing at the moment at Skopenow. So really a three-pronged approach, we would say, would be situational awareness, OSINT investigations into people and businesses, and then link analysis building on top of that. And really that's like a new intelligence, like full cycle, rather than just doing the OSINT investigation. So in terms of situational awareness, you might be looking at a geospatial map. You can use webcam information, you can use satellite imagery. So if you're looking at trafficking across borders, you can pinpoint locations that traffickers are traveling to in their vehicles. If you're pinging license plate recognition information, so you can see where they've been, track them to a specific building, and then identify maybe a convoy of vehicles that's going across a border. So then law enforcement could be positioned there or follow them. You can also then, obviously, having identified those individuals, conduct a full investigation. So you want to look at their social media, you want to look at consumer records, email addresses, phone numbers, anything they're posting online or that might be relevant to them. And you can identify behaviors from that. So looking through someone's images or videos, you might find information like frequent travel or the presence of large volumes of cash that could be indicative of human trafficking that you can then use to support an investigation. And link analysis is a new area that we've really stepped into this year, and a lot of our partners in human trafficking have found it really beneficial who have been using our tool, because You know, previously you might identify single individuals working in, say, agriculture, or, in a hotel, that are involved in trafficking. But because you can now connect those people via common data points, say an email address they share or a vehicle they've both owned, that's how you can connect those people and unmask a major network rather than just taking down a single individual. Because at the end of the day, you want to have the greatest impact possible, and you can identify new individuals involved in trafficking who you didn't know were part of a network, and really take it back to the core and focus on the leaders rather than those individuals that you can unmask through basic on-site efforts.
Bob, did you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, Steve makes a really great point. The whole opportunities around open source. I'm just going to call it all source analysis, right? I mean, the fact is that we are really looking at everything from open source to things that we've been gathering for some time, to geospatial, to pick something, humid, SIGINT, everything, right? We're able to analyze that. Is going to give us what Steve points out is true situational awareness, right? Really, what's happening in that patch? How can we drill down and really understand what's going on? More importantly, I really like the topic on link analysis. The fact that these folks tend to coordinate with other parties similar to them. So there is that link that is established out there. It may be a weak signal with regards to a link, but if you can amplify that signal, then you can certainly do a lot around, understanding the closeness, the nearness, the betweenness, technologically, the Ivan vectors, things like that are really going to help you understand, what this relationship is. Well, these two people happen to have a relationship because, they were through this location that they once moved people through, for example, or they used this vehicle that was once used to traffic this or to move that, and they have similar, opportunity sets associated with that. One of the things that we haven't yet touched on that maybe we will, but I want to make sure that we at least I would like to get the rest of the panel's point of view on, is there are some really important, and this is my 30-second soapbox, there's some really important technologies out there that I am worried that are going to get put on the shelf because of social concerns with the utilization of some of these technologies. I want to speak specifically around things like facial recognition, right? Facial recognition is an incredible technology and capability that we as a community have developed for some time. Understanding that, yes, when facial recognition was, and the AI ML engines that helped to, promote them and teach them, may have placed some inherent bias in the way we look at the demographics of those from a social recognition perspective. That can be fixed and is being fixed. I'd hate to see us throw the baby out with the bathwater because people are saying, well, there's bias in facial recognition. Well, there is if you don't train it correctly. If you use this set of training it based on criminal mugshots, then the demographics are going to be based on the criminal population in your particular region, right? So, I really want to see us take advantage of the technologies and drive new capabilities of technologies so that we become that 2 or 3 or 4 steps ahead and can do the things that Steve and Chris and Brenda's talking about, because, there's just so much opportunity to apply technology for us not to be able to apply it because people at the political level have made decisions that we don't want to use those because it is socially unacceptable or whatever. We can solve those problems. So just wanted to add that.
Can I'll kind of chime in here. I think I wholeheartedly agree with you. And I think it's about finding the right way to deploy some of these technologies. So for instance, within our tool, we do facial analysis, which is, a component of facial recognition. And the use case is I need to quickly identify, I need to age band the evidence, right? So I need to separate out. If I know that I'm looking for CSAM, which involves children or children of a specific age group, am I looking for infants and toddlers? Am I looking for preteens or adults, right? So if I'm looking at the suspect, I'm probably typically looking for an adult or a young adult. If I'm looking for victim identification, I'm trying to find how many pictures of, infants or toddlers. I can do that quickly with facial analysis. It would be grueling to do it manually. It is grueling to do it manually. So I have to deploy that. I think another thing that's going to happen here in relatively short order, Bob, is we have to be able to detect between not only is this known CSAM, original CSAM potentially, or is this an AI fake? Facial analysis is going to be critical for the time being in the short term, and AI is getting very good very quickly, but there's still tells in most AI generated images of humans.
Brett, you're spot on. Deep fake analysis, I think, is going to be the next frontier from a technology perspective to really help provide those kinds of things. Because what the bad guys want you doing is chasing dead ends. If we can immediately, cut those false positives down, to use a financial term to bring Chris into the conversation here, if we can reduce the false positive side, then they're focusing on the things that we need them focused on. And in my humble opinion.
And a lot of times we're focused. I mean, we talk about the suspect a lot, finding the suspect, tying the suspect to the keyboard. But really, a big aspect of this is let's rescue victims, right? Let's get them the help that they need. And there are two ways to take down the network. One is by educating and finding victims and having them help us help their peers and their colleagues and other people who are in similar situations and help us get smarter.
Yeah, absolutely. This is what really wanted to really quickly too. This is great, and I have opinions, but I wish I had your opinions on this. I don't deal in that space as much as you all do, but I'd like to circle back really quickly to the labor trafficking, point you brought up, and just kind of give a perspective on, how in banks we view it from an investigation standpoint, and then how the power of, like, as I've spent 2 years now with Quantexa, getting to know what they do and how powerful it is to give a view both to bank investigators and law enforcement as well. But so on the bank side of things, when we get alerts, right? We get an alert, we do an investigation, we go out to Google, really, right? For the most part, most institutions tell you to do that, or some other search provider, and they'll run things through, maybe a negative news screening solution or something like that, and pull what they can together. But then it's still very manual, not unlike what law enforcement really has gone through, right? Where you're trying to piece people together with businesses, how are they connected, or how are addresses connected. Very manual, very time consuming, and banks frankly don't have the hours and days and weeks to do that, because they've got to get stuff to law enforcement quickly, right? One of the things that's been really, really great to see on all forms of human trafficking, especially labor, is what Quantexa has been able to do with that, right? That issue is, taking your customer, right, say construction supply company, LLC, they're going to send payments out to different parties, right, to pay for things. You might get an alert, might investigate, might type in some names, might not find much. But taking that external data, right, you talked about that open source intelligence that's out there, whether it's collated by a data provider or if it's scraped from the internet, wherever it comes from. But one of the things Quantexa does is ingest that data in and then resolves it against that construction supply LLC. So say, for example, that organization has 5 founders. They all own a bunch of businesses globally. Construction LLC is also tied via address or corporate records, to other businesses globally. As an investigator, you're not going to see that, right? It's very hard. But being able to take that data, resolve it, and say, well, actually, all this data and information and all these people are actually all associated together. Now let's put that into a network in front of your face and let you see that entire story, right? Whether it be negative news, whether it be the parties they're connected to, maybe they're connected to other parties. And so we've seen that in clients where, they've deployed this technology and instantaneously, right? I'm generalizing it, but they see this kind of labor trafficking issue happening. It's been found, right, just from doing something like this, whereas before they weren't seeing that. And I think that to me is like that. I still get goosebumps whenever I watch that. I'm like, I wish I had that my entire career, that view. I never had that. And so law enforcement has used that as well. The Quantexa technology to have that view. So I think it's bringing that data together. And if you can bring things like, if there's the data from a facial technology perspective, you can bring in and ingest and include, it is super powerful. And that's a view that I think we all need to do more around this space. So.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you. Well, I want to go back, Bret, for just a second. You mentioned the victim, who I
Yeah.
think oftentimes we are so focused on our suspects for investigating these crimes, but let's talk about the victims for a second. We don't, and Bob, you've talked about this before. We don't talk about the technological implication for the victims in these cases enough. So I'd like for you to talk about that. What do you mean by that?
So, sorry, just clarify, is that a question for Bob or for me?
Well, Bob had talked about Bret, you had brought up the victims, and Bob, you had talked about before with me with technological
Yeah.
implications on victims. So I really would like to focus on the victims here and the implications that this technology has.
Yeah, let me kick it off real quick and then I'll dish it over to Bret here. The problem is that, when we're able to do the things that we are supposed to do, and to Chris's point, rescue victims, or to Bret's point, to rescue victims, we all think that, okay, that's the end of the game, right? These, they're now living in a happy life and they're no longer part of this horrific event, and they're going to move on to bigger and better things. And the reality is we're living in a world where data is permanent. This never goes away, and unfortunately, the technologies allow those people that have perpetrated the crime on the victim to continue to perpetrate that crime over time by continuing those abilities to interact with those victims, or keep those victims in front of mind with regards to the events that they went through and so forth. So they never get a chance to heal, because they're always under the guise of, gee, this happened. Why didn't you just run away when you could? They brought you in to clean a slaughterhouse. Why didn't you decide to walk to an adult and say, hey, I'm only 13 years old and I'm whatever? Because they can't, because that they aren't empowered. They don't understand that they're empowered to do that. And as a result, technology is that yoke that continues to burden them, as much as the physical capabilities of what the bad guys are doing to them on a daily basis. And Bret, I'll just dish it to you to add your comments.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think another important perspective is here, not only depending on the age of the victim, but also some of these victims don't have the full mental capacity, not only because of age, but because of disability or mental capabilities to understand what's going on. And so the people who perpetrate these crimes, they the topic of grooming, but they groom, whether it could be any number of ways that these individuals are groomed, and a lot of times that's used in the case of sexual exploitation, but it could also be used in the terms of other types of exploitation, even labor trafficking, where there's a promise of a better life. There's promises, and so that person that was in their community, they don't see them anymore because they went overseas and they have a better life, and they're being told stories of things that are the promised land on the other side. And so a big part of this comes back to what can communities do, I think, and what are how can we better educate young people to know what the signs are. And I think that the hospitality industry, for one, has done a much better job stepping up and trying to make people aware of human trafficking. Again, the fact that the UN report said that more of these victims are self-reporting, that's a good and a bad sign, right? That's good because somewhere they're feeling more comfortable to self-report, but we can't simply rely on that. And I think that the other thing that the UK is doing, which is very good, is they are really focused on victim and witness, and making sure that a lot of times in a lot of places the information that's derived from a victim or a witness, it goes into a police database. And the UK has woken up to that and said, hey, listen, we're going to separate out these databases. We're going to give the victim a lot more control over what information they're bringing. And we've actually taken that to heart as well. So in our tool, rather than doing a full data dump of someone's phone, nobody wants to give up all that information, giving them the comfort to say, listen, we're going to take this slice of time, which is the time that we all agree on that we need to pull information from, and we'll use that slice of time or this app where we'll pull data from. So we're not collecting all your pictures and all your, all the other information. And I think that's, it really goes back to developing some compassionate policing, when we talk to victims and witnesses.
Yeah, no, Brett, that's I think a great point. I mean, the one thing that I love about technology is how prolific it is. The problem again is, there's GPS in virtually everything that we have now. Every device that we own has probably got some form of GPS in it. So, to be able to track that victim, to be able to look at the prolific of CCITV, for example, in the UK. Right. We are not as we don't use it as well as they do in the UK. But that you are in front of a camera so often in the UK that it gives you a great advantage from a law enforcement perspective to be able to recreate events that lead up to and after the actual event. Unfortunately, if you can get access to that same technology as the bad guy, you can do some incredible things with regards to controlling your victim. The surveillance aspect around control is a frightening aspect to these people, especially when you're talking about domestic servitude and things like that, knowing that you're always under observation, that, I'm afraid to walk down the street and say to somebody, help me, because I'm always being watched. I'm always being observed. So it's an incredible problem that's got miles to go before anybody sleeps. That's for sure.
Perfect. Well, we're starting to run out a little bit of a time here. So we probably just start wrapping it up a little bit. I wanted to give each of you the opportunity. We've talked about your companies, your technology, but if there's anything additional that you'd like to add about your company's mission for Tech for Good and how you're supporting organizations like ATII. Don't everybody jump in at once.
Sure.
Chris, do you want to go ahead and just talk a little bit about your mission for Tech for Good at ATII?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mentioned earlier, going back several years and working with Aaron and trying to assist him before even the Quantexa days around, what does he need, right, as an organization, and what are they looking to do with the data they have? And obviously they're doing great things around training and education and just so many amazing initiatives I've been able to talk to him about. I think a big piece, what he looks for is the data, right? They have great, amazing data that they pull. And so how do we get that into the hands of banks, right? Law enforcement is obviously a big part of that too, but coming from the bank side of things, how do we get this into the hands of banks that isn't just a manual, data dump that they then have to take and try to figure out what to do with? How do we bring in technology into that framework to make sure they can move quicker on it, they can action these things faster? A lot of times on the anti-money laundering side, you get an alert, you might not look at it for 30 days. Well, that's not helpful when it comes to human trafficking, labor trafficking, child exploitation. Those victims need help quickly, right? And banks are in that position where they're seeing the financial transactions happen and they can see them real time. And can they do something about that, right? So how do we take that data, organizations like ATII have, and use that and move quicker with banks? And so thinking about that, right, and how Quantexa can help and what their technology does, and taking that data, resolving it quickly, right, giving it to investigators fast, almost near real time if you want to action things. Let's take that data, bring it into that network, right? I talked about resolution, right? Resolve that human trafficking potential red flag data, whether it be phone numbers, addresses, right, names, businesses, whatever that is, and put that in the hands of banks right away and say, hey, within the network, your customer, is either tied on this website that we know is a website where there's child exploitation happening, right? People are, sharing images or information, but there's names and email addresses and things like that they just put out there, right? They do. And your customer is potentially involved in that. So bank, how can you action that fast? So that's what I'm working on with Quantexa, is how do we do that, right, and give that quicker to the banks to support the ATII mission and what Aaron's trying to do with the team. And that's a big part of that. That's a hard thing to do, right? I've talked to many technology companies on the transaction monitoring side globally, and I'm not seeing a lot of that happening, right, where it's right there for the investigators. So that's a big mission for myself. I think what Quantexa is trying to do and has done and is doing more of it is to get that in their hands. So I think that's going to be important for the future of how we help victims.
Excellent. Thank you. Steve, what about Skopenow? Talk a little bit about your mission.
Yeah, absolutely. So ultimately, we're always trying to make or help our customers drive efficiency and effectiveness in their investigations. And we did some research actually recently in our State of OSINT report, and a lot of practitioners in the industry are saying that they're not getting enough training in how to conduct open source investigations, so they're relying on free webinars. A lot of organizations don't have OSINT policies, only 20% of the practitioners we spoke to. And that means they're relying on investigator discretion, which means investigations aren't consistent. They're looking at different sources, different times, maybe missing intelligence. But also there's risk because, you know, if the human trafficker finds out you're investigating them, they're a threat to you. And there's all sorts of legal risks as well. So really what we're doing is putting in place a solution that enables organizations from sort of any industry conducting investigations to have a consistent and quick approach to conducting open source investigation. So looking at all of the public data sources every single time, putting them together in a standardized template, and then producing it to a court ready standard. And whether you're law enforcement or working with law enforcement, you know, law enforcement are reluctant to often take cases or from outside agencies because they don't have the manpower. They have to focus on the intelligence that is, you know, actionable. So providing that capability to charities that don't know how to do an OSINT investigation, giving them an automated solution that does it for them, just enables them to hand over a standardized template to law enforcement. They know it has everything they need and it's to a high standards with graded intelligence, court ready to roll. So really, we're just trying to put that technology in the hands of the right people to make sure that we can continue to combat crimes like human trafficking and, you know, everything else that's on the table.
Right. Doesn't stop, does it?
No.
Bret, you're working frontline. Talk to me about your mission.
Yeah, our goal is to make it as easy as possible for investigators who are super busy to be able to quickly and easily uncover signals or identify signals of human trafficking, child exploitation, or other types of cybercrime. We do that by making the tools super easy to use. Training is 8 hours. It can be done online or in person. So we've really kind of taken the best of breed automation to make it easier and faster to investigate crimes. The other part of that goal is, I mentioned compassionate policing. We want to help be a part of bringing law enforcement back closer to their community. And in the case of CSAM cases, if a law enforcement agency is going out and they have a policy of confiscating every device and bringing it back and it sits in the lab for 6 or 9 months, if you're lucky, before that goes back, you are ripping worlds away from people. The kids can't do their homework. The wife can't call her sister. Nobody remembers phone numbers anymore. So we want to find ways to bring community back together to be effective in helping quickly identify and help victims, and then, you know, getting the suspects, letting the officers make immediate arrest decisions, putting them behind bars, giving them court ready reports that they can take them through to prosecution. So privileged to be part of this discussion today. I want to thank Aaron and Larry at the ATII at Anti-Human Trafficking Intelligence Initiative. We actually have collaborated with them where we pull in the search profiles that they've provided to us. So law enforcement agents that actually want to get access to this anti-human trafficking data, they can come to our website, adfsolutions.com/ATII, and they can request access to that data, and we share that with them. And this, again, ATI has done all the hard work. We're just making it available, making it easy for law enforcement to use.
Fantastic.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Christine.
Bret. Thank you. Bob, finish it out. Tell us about Siren and your Tech for Good mission.
Sure. So, you know, this is the big data issue, right? We know data is not getting any smaller. You know, I think the stats are 90% of the world's digital data has been created in the last 2 years. Less than 10% of that's ever been analyzed, right? The reality is there's an amazing amount of information out there, amazing amount, whether that's open source, whether that's human source, whether that's signal source, whether that's digi source, doesn't matter, it's there. What we wanted to do and what we've been able to successfully do is to build an all source platform to allow you to bring that information together, provide a series of sophisticated tools to, as I said earlier, move faster than the speed of threat and assimilate what that world is telling you. Develop a common operating picture so you can really understand what's happening out there in your world and what things that you can do to make a difference at it. You know, I'm a strong believer that if, what do they say, you know, digital is king, right? You know, data is king, and the whole digital data thing is king. Access and distribution in the right hands is King Kong. It can make a massive difference in what we can do to change up what's happening here. And, you know, we made a decision that we were going to build an all source platform. We're going to partner with people on the data side, like the Shadow Dragons of the world and, you know, the Sensings of the world to do identity deconfliction, and let them do what they do best, bring it all together and really allow it, you know, with our partnership with Elastic, to give you a limitless scalable platform that will give you the capability really to you know, assimilate faster than the speed of threat. And that's kind of our goal.
Excellent. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. Bob, you kind of foreshadowed earlier to my last question that I wanted to ask each of you. One sentence from each of you. And Bob, I think I know what your answer might be, but what are we going to be talking about as far as trends in technology for next year at next year's summit? Chris.
I don't know if it's a sentence, but I'd say information sharing. I'm seeing more of that globally happening, and I think we'll be talking about that next year in a bigger way.
Excellent. Bret.
I think it's going to be a lot of discussion about artificial intelligence.
Thank you. Steve, what you got?
I'm going to jump on what Bret said there. We spoke before about deepfakes, the potential of there being no victim in, you know, the material that's being created. How do you investigate that? I think that's going to be a real trend.
Absolutely. And Bob, I assume you agree, but go ahead and take it.
I agree with everything they said. You know, this is the power of big data in the right hands, being able to assimilate what information can tell us and being able to action it very quickly.
Thank you. Well, with that, gentlemen, we are going to wrap up our 2023 Tech for Good panel. So on behalf of the Anti-Human Trafficking Intelligence Initiative and all of the summit attendees, I just want to thank Chris and Bret, Bob and Steve, and all of your companies for not only joining us for this impactful discussion today, but for your support of the Follow Money, Fight Slavery Summit, and for all of the good work that you and your companies are doing to fight human trafficking and child exploitation. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks, Brad.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.